Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am talking about the Fate Accelerated DC Marvel tabletop role-playing game, Amazon Invasion, which was led by Tanyar. And so last we picked up, all of the player characters were on two different shuttles. One were on a shuttle with Batman, who were going to execute Batman's plan, which was to fight the 30,000 Amazons who were going to be on the shores of California at noon that day, and fight them as the Amazons had defined the fight, which was sword and shield, right? And then another group of there was one other player character, Jumper, who was leading his own team, and that team was going to aid the U.S. military in fighting the Amazons with modern weapons. The Amazons had said that if this was done, this would trigger them bringing down the wrath of Themyscira, which the player characters had surmised would most likely be attack upon them by a Mount Olympus god or goddesses, right? So that's where we were, right? Now, the last thing that happened also was that there had been an announcement that Poison Ivy had been killed. Her body was found in Gotham City. Batman was told by Jumper this information and Nightwing, and he became very upset and immediately tried to reroute both shuttles to that event. Everyone in the shuttle said no, Batman, and actually, surprisingly, we're able to convince him. He got fairly upset, and at that point decided to do that on his own to retrieve Poison Ivy's body. So when he left that shuttle, the way he left that shuttle was typical Batman way. He just opened the door of the shuttle and zipped out of the shuttle in flight, right? So all of the player characters in that shuttle, which were Amazo and Cardiac and Colin Crowley and Harley Quinn and Jericho, all needed to make a flash. It was all needed to make a quick roll in order to stay within the ship. They were able to do that, and all of them continued on to California. At this point, the player characters took the time to continue to plan on what they would do in the morning, right? So their plan at that time was they had scrounged up about 6,000 swords and shields. These were scrounged up from mostly from cosplayers, from Civil War reenactors, from Renaissance Fair goers, annual Renaissance Fair goers, and the like, which means that they were going to be greatly outnumbered, right? So that's a serious problem. So they're continuing to plan, and they're just saying, how can we, and even beyond that, even the 6,000 people that they had were going to be not nearly as good trained fighters as it wouldn't even be a 1-for-1. You'd be lucky to get 4 of these cosplayers to equal 1 Amazon. So they're vastly outnumbered. Batman's plan seems to be in shreds. And so they're continuing to talk, right? And no real good ideas came up on how to defeat the Amazons with sword and shield. But at that point, what did happen was Cardiac said, what about Aquaman, right? And so Aquaman is in the shuttle with them, and Cardiac engages Aquaman. And he says, listen, is there anything you can do to help us? And Aquaman says, well, there's very limited things I can do to help us. I really can't bring a whole lot to bear on the shore, right? And he says, however, Aquaman says, listen, I can drown all 30 of these Amazons now. They're in 600 boats sitting off the shore of California. I can end this immediately. I can just drown them with a massive storm and with, a school of sharks and, 25 other ways that I can handle with the sea. And everybody was like, whoa, because they're all concerned and viably, and they're saying, listen, Wonder Woman was brought up to Mount Olympus by Athena, but we have to answer to her when she gets back, right? So everybody's like, that's not really going to help. Well, at that point, Colin Crowley says, wait, Aquaman, what about whales and like krakens and those kind of creatures? Couldn't they take, when you upset the boats and the Amazons fall into the water, couldn't some of them be swept up like a whale, like in the belly of a whale, a la the Jonas, a la Jonah, right? And so at that point, everybody looks around and he says, yes, yeah, I absolutely could do that. He said, there's, in Atlantis, the creatures of the sea have found many ways to transport people. Now, of course, the Amazons would be being transported against their will, and we would need to work together to like take away their weapons, things like that, and put them into the whales. But whales, krakens, octopuses with air bubbles, all those things could be used to transport Amazons back to. We could upset their boats with the storm, and then capture them with the creatures of the sea, and then escort them back to Themyscira. The only issue, though, is that is going to be very challenging. I think I could get between 25 and 50% of them back, right? Which means that 25 to 50% of them are going to drown, right? So everybody looks around and they're like, well, we're talking about the same numbers that are going to be lost in the battle. Maybe that's a good solution, right? And so they really come, everybody there really decides, hey, this is a pretty viable solution. We never let them get to land. We do everything we can to save as many of them as we can. And this is a great solution, right? So at the same time, we go over to Jumper, and he is planning on how to handle the invasion from the east side of California. He is helping. I think it was General Crothers, and he's working directly with the Army. And he's talking with them by conference. They're on their way, and at the same time, Jumper brings in all the major members of Justice League Dark. So Deadman and Madame Voodoo and Zatanna and there's a few others in there. John Constantine. He brings in John Constantine. Quite a few, right? In addition to that, he brings in all the outsiders to aid him. So you're talking Katana and quite a number of other significant heroes. And then he puts forward a very consistent plan for aiding and using 400 tanks that have been brought there and 12,000 infantry troops. And so they work out how they're gonna attack together, right? We go back to the Batman shuttle, which is now sans Batman, and the major leader there at this point there really was no leader. They're all working in tandem, and they have now donned their plan of upsetting the boats using Aquaman, and then in addition to that, grabbing up Amazons that go into the sea with whales and krakens and squids, right? Making sure they don't drown, using air bubbles, Amazons within the bellies of the whales, all those type of things, to save as many of them as possible. And this plan is then donned the Pinocchio plan, right? So they all talk about the Pinocchio plan. They decide to go forward with the Pinocchio plan. And then in the morning, the Pinocchio plan, or actually well before the morning, like 6 hours before the morning, their shuttle arrives. They sweep right over California. And at that point, Aquaman, jumps out of his plane onto one of the Amazon ships. All of the player characters jump down onto the Amazon ship as well. They all immediately sweep the Amazon ship clean, knocking all the rest of the Amazons into the water. Aquaman calls up a gigantic storm, which also they're also aided by Weather Wizard, who I am aware is a bad guy, and so they're able to use him. So Weather Wizard and comes in. They bring in Aquaman. Aquaman, makes a gigantic sea storm, knocks over all the boats, and then the player characters immediately, sans Jumper, immediately go to town, aiding and getting the Amazons into the whales, into the Krakens, maw, swallowed whole, and then also, of course, into brought by squids, and they all get roles of clever or flashy, and to see how many of the Amazons they can additionally squeeze in. Can they make it between the 25 and the 50, right? Now, I will say this. I'm just absolutely in love with the Fate Accelerated system. It's so nice. So one of the things that we did with this game was the last session we did before the Amazon invasion session, we had 3 players. We easily scaled up to 6 players with this game, and it's so easy to scale up and let new players come in, which is almost impossible with most other tabletop role-playing games. Fate Accelerated is 100% free, and the rule set is 50 pages long. Character creation takes legitimately 15 minutes. Not like, I say it takes 15 minutes and it takes an hour and a half. It legitimately takes 15 minutes, which is fantastic. So you can bring in new players extremely fast. So we were able to bring in all these new players into this session, and it was just great having all 6 of these players there. So so at this point, all of those players. Oh, that's right. That's where I was heading. But one of the things is I am still getting my rhythm with the Fate Accelerated. So these guys rolled higher than I expected, and they were able to save 80% of the Amazons. All right, because I gave them essentially a formula. For every point over this mark of 4, you'll get an additional 5%. Right. Well, there's like 5 people rolling, and they're bringing numbers of between 5 and 25% apiece. It was significant, right? And so they saved 80% of the Amazons. So they completely rebuffed the Amazon invasion, took 80% of the Amazons safely back to Themyscira. Krakens vomited them up on the shore. The whales just kind of spit them out on the shore as well. Air bubbles were popped, and all the Amazons are just kind of dumped on the shore of Themyscira. And Aquaman kind of stands there triumphant, which was really, really interesting with the PCs. And then, but, we can't forget, that means 6,000 Amazons, 20% of the force that came in, are now at the bottom of the ocean, dead, right? So that's significant, and they're going to have to answer for that when Wonder Woman returns from Mount Olympus. So that was the full sweep. One other thing is all the planning that Jumper did. Jumper, the player, his name is Bill. He's a really engaged player, very smart guy. It's a real blessing to have him at the table. And he did all this planning, and it came for naught. None of his plans were even used. So he was just standing there in California with nothing to do but eat chacos and have some horchata. And so it was just a little sad, and also, if you guys are paying attention, thank you very much for listening, because there's one other thing that happened. I had to apologize to my players because there was not 1 ounce of combat in this game. Everything was abstracted, everything was at a high level. There were no combat scenes within the game. It was all social interaction between superheroes and planning, and then. We'd played for 4 hours, and we were at the end of the night, and so the last scene was done, abstracted, and the plan used a lot of non-player characters that weren't them. And one of the players said, so if you're playing, Justice League, it's really just this whole game becomes a puzzle of how do you use the Justice League people. Now, one of the nice things is that would seem like it should be boring, but it wasn't at all. I had the DK books. If you're aware of the DK books, they make these beautiful books that are literally have literally this one book is very, very large. It's 14, 16 inches high and about 12 inches long, wide, and it's about 400 pages. It has 1,000 DC characters in it. And so, you know, I had people, you know, so I was going through my book and, you know, saying which members of the, you know, Justice League Dark could help. And they were all just kind of thinking, you know, and you know, who does the Justice League have? You know, and because the Justice League is as powerful as it is, they could even reach out to superheroes that technically weren't in the Justice League. And so it was a pretty cool puzzle. And in addition to that, you know, like Bill was, you know, Bill has his laptop open. And a few guys had their laptop open, and they were just like going through heroes and seeing how they could use them. And it was really fascinating. We really had a great time. It was a 4-hour session, which I don't like to run games over 4 hours. So I felt good that we were able to wrap it up within the night. That it was one full cohesive story. It was just, you know, it's about as good as you can get on a tabletop role-playing game or on Fate Accelerated, as far as like, we really hit the rhythm as far as the players were there. We had really engaged players. I was blessed. I had been able to spend, you know, 2 or 3 days that week just getting ready for the game, doing a lot of mental planning. One of the biggest things was just me reading villains that I wasn't aware of, making sure I understood, you know, who and what they were. So it was a really fantastic session. I really had a blast, you know, just running this session for the guys. This entire campaign is kind of a one-off. I'm blessed to be playing in a lot of other campaigns, so I run this when I can, and I do have some requests for when's the next session. You know, we're getting together just to plan what characters want to do for the next session. You know, one of my players likes to get together. You know, we go to like a pizza parlor or something, grab a pizza, and talk about the next game. This is something I had never seen before. It's like getting together between the game to talk about the game. I thought it was strange when one of my players told me about it, that they did this. I went to a few of them. They're very fun. And so I'm really having a blast with this game. And part of that fun is just getting to tell you guys about it on YouTube. I really appreciate, you know, everything that, you know, just getting the opportunity to share this with you. And that was the story of the Amazon invasion into California for the Fate Accelerated DC Marvel tabletop role-playing game. Thank you. Take care, everyone.